My sister-in-law gave my son a DNA kit to destroy my marriage, but karma ruined hers when her son also wanted one, and the results came back. I met my husband James when we were in our late 20s, and we quickly fell in love. After 2 years of dating, we got married, and since then we've lived a happy and peaceful life together. We welcomed our beautiful son, and we felt like the perfect family. I thought nothing could tear us apart until Sarah, my sister-in-law, decided to stick her nose into our business. Sarah and I have never gotten along since the moment James introduced her to me. You could tell right away that we weren't going to get along. It's not that I didn't try, but it was clear that Sarah didn't care about that. At her wedding, she accused me of trying to overshadow her because I wore a cream-colored dress. Now, I should say that this wasn't my decision. Sarah specifically chose for all her bridesmaids to wear cream, but somehow on her big day, it became about me stealing her spotlight. From then on, it was a constant game of snide comments, double-edged compliments, and petty actions. If I wore a new dress, Sarah would say, "It's nice, but I liked it more when I saw it in the store last year." If Nathan accomplished something, she found a way to downplay it by comparing it to her own son, Tommy. But James and I always tried not to give importance to Sarah's nastiness. We wanted Nathan and Tommy to grow up close like brothers. However, things took a dark turn this last Christmas when Sarah decided to cause chaos in a way no one expected. For Christmas, she gave Nathan one of those DNA testing kits that are so popular these days. At first, I didn't think much about it. Nathan had always been interested in science and loved learning about family history, but it wasn't exactly a common gift to give a child. That same night, James pulled me aside and told me that Sarah had made some strange, almost cryptic comments toward him, like, finally getting some answers and the truth always comes to light. It didn't take me long to connect the dots. Nathan has green eyes while both James and I have brown eyes. Of course, anyone with basic knowledge of genetics knows that recessive traits like green eyes can skip generations. But Sarah had been making subtle, passive-aggressive comments for years, insinuating that maybe James wasn't really Nathan's father. I was furious. Not only was she being awful to us, but now she had involved my son. We agreed to let Nathan take the test if he wanted to, confident that the results would only confirm what we already knew. Nathan is our son, and the test wouldn't say anything different. Nathan was excited about the science behind the DNA test. He loved the idea of learning about his ancestors and where his family came from, so we helped him through the process and sent off the test. Meanwhile, Sarah's son, Tommy, had been watching all of this with great interest. As a curious 14-year-old, Tommy decided he wanted to do a DNA test too. Sarah's husband, Todd, thought it would be a fun family activity, so they ordered a kit for him as well. What started as harmless curiosity soon turned into a family disaster. Weeks later, the results came in. Nathan's results were just as expected. James was his father without a doubt. But then came the shock of our lives when Tommy's results came back. Todd wasn't Tommy's biological father. Sarah had had an affair, and Tommy wasn't Todd's son. Todd was devastated. He had raised Tommy as his own son, never suspecting that Sarah had been unfaithful. To make matters worse, Todd demanded a paternity test for their youngest daughter, who was only 7 years old. The results confirmed his worst fears. He wasn't her father either. Sarah's life was falling apart before her eyes, and it wasn't a quiet or private collapse. The whole family knew, and the consequences were terrible. Within days, Todd filed for divorce and moved out of the house. The irony of the situation was hard to ignore. Sarah's attempt to destroy my marriage only led to the exposure of the lies in her own. Tommy was the one who suffered the most. Nathan was affected too. He and Tommy had always been very close, and seeing his cousin go through all of this upset him. He started asking questions about why Tommy's dad wasn't around anymore, and it broke my heart to hear him so worried about his cousin. As the days passed, Sarah's life continued to crumble. Todd pushed for full custody of the children, determined to minimize Sarah's influence in their lives. At family gatherings, she was a nervous wreck, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. She was defeated. One day, Sarah reached out to me just to ask for help. She wanted me to speak with Todd to convince him to soften the custody arrangements. She was desperate to save what was left of her relationship with her children, and she was asking me, of all people, for advice. At first, I was stunned. After everything she had done, trying to destroy my marriage, causing chaos at every turn, how could she have the nerve to ask me for help? I ignored her calls at first, refusing to even consider the idea of helping her. But as the days went by, I found myself thinking about Tommy. He was the real victim in all of this. None of this was his fault, and yet he was the one suffering the most. James, of course, told me to stay out of it. He was convinced that Sarah had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. But a part of me wondered if I could help bring some peace to the children involved. It wasn't their fault that their mother had made terrible decisions. So, I found myself at a crossroads, unsure of what the right decision was. Should I help Sarah, or should I let her face the consequences of her own actions? What would you do in my place? Update 1. I wanted to give you all an update on what has been happening since my last post, and I hope it sheds some light on the complex situation we're facing. Sarah continues to call me constantly, and to be honest, it's becoming exhausting. I thought at some point she would calm down or back off, but she hasn't. She's relentless. There was one particularly bad day when she called me 3 times in a row, leaving long, tearful voice messages. I could hear the desperation in her voice, but after everything, it was hard for me to feel much sympathy. At one point, my husband James got so frustrated that he couldn't take it anymore and called her himself. James rarely loses his temper, so when he made that call, I knew the situation was serious. From across the room, I could hear him explode, telling her he was fed up with her disrespect and manipulation of our family. After that conversation, things got worse. Sarah's tone changed again, and she started texting me repeatedly, alternating between asking for my help and accusing me of trying to ruin her life. One moment, she was begging for my support, telling me how much she needed me to talk to Todd and fix things. The next, she was calling me a manipulator, saying that I was jealous of her and her family and that I wanted to destroy her marriage. Through all of this, my biggest concern has been the children. They're innocent in all of this, but they are the ones who are suffering the most. I can't stop thinking about Tommy and Nathan. The revelation about Tommy's real father must have been devastating for him, and it's clear he's struggling to process it. It's hard for me to watch him go through this without being able to help. Nathan, on the other hand, doesn't fully understand what's going on, but he knows that something is wrong. We've explained it to him, but he's still too young to grasp everything. A few days ago, we had a family gathering, and Nathan wanted to play with Tommy like old times. They used to be very close, inseparable even. But when Tommy came over, he was distant, quiet, and barely interacted with Nathan. Nathan wanted to play with him, but instead, Tommy made excuses, saying he was tired. Meanwhile, Sarah kept sending me these long, dramatic messages. Just yesterday, she sent me a message saying she felt betrayed by our family. I don't understand how someone who was unfaithful can feel betrayed, but she still seems completely incapable of taking responsibility for her actions. It's always someone else's fault. Mine, Todd's, never hers. James thinks we should intervene and try to help Tommy, especially since he and Nathan are so close. But he's also worried about the consequences of getting too involved in Sarah's mess. We've been trying to walk a fine line between supporting the kids and protecting our own peace, but it's been harder than we imagined. To complicate things even more, everything has started to bring James closer to Sarah. He's been trying to understand everything that happened and wanted to talk about the situation. James, although reluctantly, agreed to meet with Todd for coffee. When he came back, he looked more conflicted than ever. Todd, understandably, is devastated. He told James that he feels like his whole life has been a lie, and now he's struggling to figure out how to raise the kids alongside Sarah after everything that's happened. Talking to Todd only made James feel even more torn. Todd is a good man, and he's just trying to do the best he can for his children, despite the nightmare he's in. After hearing Todd's perspective, James is even more conflicted about how to move forward. He wants to help, But we both know that getting too involved could pull us further into Sarah's drama. It's hard to know what the right decision is. Every time I see Tommy, I feel an overwhelming urge to help him. He's just a kid caught in the middle of this mess, and he doesn't deserve any of this. Natan keeps asking why Tommy seems so sad all the time, and it breaks my heart not being able to give him an honest answer. The more I think about it, the more torn I feel between wanting to intervene and the fear of being swallowed up by Sarah's chaotic world. At the end of the day, all I want is to protect the kids. Tommy and Natan deserve better than this, and it's painful to see them suffer because of their parents' mistakes. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I hope we can find a way to resolve this without causing more harm. I'll keep you updated on what happens, and again, thank you for your continued support. Update 2. A lot has happened in the past few days, so brace yourselves. It's been a lot for all of us, and honestly, I'm not sure how much longer this can go on. First of all, Sarah decided to go ahead with a formal medical paternity test. She wasn't satisfied with the results of the home DNA kit, claiming that it wasn't a reliable source to make such an important decision. To be fair, home tests do have a margin of error, and I guess she was holding on to the little hope she had left. But the results didn't change. The medical paternity test confirmed what the other test had shown. Todd is not Tommy's father. Sarah simply dug herself into a deeper hole. I wasn't surprised by the result, but it left no room for doubt. Todd, especially, seemed to be trying to brace himself for the worst. But when those medical results came in, I could see that it still hurt him deeply. He looked devastated, as if the last bit of hope he was holding on to had been ripped away. He had mentioned to James before that he wasn't expecting a miracle, but there was always a small part of him that hoped the test was wrong. After hearing the news, Todd became more withdrawn. Apparently, after receiving the results, Todd started investigating and tracked down the man he believed Sarah had the affair with. According to what Todd told James, this man was a co-worker of Sarah's. Todd had suspected something for a long time, but Sarah always dismissed it as just work-related matters. Now, everything started to make sense for Todd. He remembered moments when Sarah and this man were unusually close, attending work events together and texting late at night. She always had excuses that convinced Todd that it was something innocent, but now it seemed like all those suspicions were taking shape. So, Todd decided to confront the guy. He tracked him down to his house and went there without telling anyone. From what I later heard, Todd was not in a good mental state. He was hurt, angry, and desperate for answers. Things quickly spiraled out of control. The man initially denied everything, but Todd wasn't willing to accept that. It soon turned into a shouting match, and it didn't take long before it turned physical. Neighbors heard the commotion and called the police. By the time the officers arrived, both Todd and the man were bruised. Todd ended up being arrested for assault, and now he's facing charges. It's a disaster. James had to go to the police station to help Todd. He paid his bail, but Todd is facing serious legal problems now. He's trying to argue that the fight was provoked, but it will be difficult to prove in court. All of this is just continuing to spiral out of control, and I can't help but feel that it all stems from Sarah's decision to hide the truth for so many years. Todd is falling apart, and it's heartbreaking to see someone who's always been so calm crumble like this. Meanwhile, Sarah is desperately trying to do damage control, but it's too late. Todd has filed for full custody of the children. Sarah is in a panic. She's trying to convince everyone that Todd is the problem, calling him a psychopath and using the fight as proof that he's unstable and dangerous. She's terrified that Todd will take the kids away from her, and she's attacking anyone who isn't on her side. Todd has been talking about moving to another state with the kids, wanting to put distance between them and Sarah, believing a fresh start is what the children need, far from all the chaos. But I'm not so sure. I understand his desire to protect them, but taking them away from everything they know could do more harm than good. Legally, it will be a tough battle. The last time I saw Sarah, it seemed like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she kept repeating that everything was falling apart, that everyone was trying to take her children. It was as if she was having a panic attack. Still, she sees herself as the victim in all of this. At this point, I think we have no choice but to get involved. We're already in this mess, like it or not. James thinks we should support Todd and help him through the legal troubles he's facing, especially since Todd seems to be the more stable parent in all of this. I think it's a good idea. I'll keep you updated as things progress, but for now, we're just holding on and hoping for a resolution that won't completely destroy these kids' lives. Update 3. There's a lot to share about everything that's happened since my last post. First, let's talk about Todd and the man Sarah had the affair with. You know how that confrontation led to Todd being arrested after things got physical. Initially, we thought Todd might face serious assault charges, but the man decided not to press charges. From what Todd told us, it seems this man wanted to distance himself from the whole mess. He probably realized his involvement could make things worse for him both personally and professionally. Although this man admitted to the affair when the police got involved, he has since cut ties with both Todd and Sarah. In a way, this chapter of the story has closed, and honestly, I think that's for the best. Todd doesn't need to keep fighting with someone who clearly never cared about the consequences of his actions. Many have asked me about Tommy's sister and why I haven't spoken much about her. Well, she's like Nathan. She's been told what's going on, but she doesn't seem to fully understand, which is why she doesn't appear as affected. Deep down, I think she's going through some sort of grief, but she hasn't expressed it as much as Tommy has. He's older and more mature, so he understands what's happening better, and this seems to be affecting him more, which is why I've spoken more about him. However, both of them are clearly victims of their mother. James and I are here to support both of them, no matter who their father or mother is. As for Tommy, things have gotten worse. Some kids at his school have started bullying him, which has led him to get into a few fights. It doesn't help that Sarah fills his head with the idea that all of this is his father's fault. Tommy knows that his mother cheated on Todd and that he's not his biological father, but Sarah has told him that she did it because Todd was bad to her. This just proves that she would rather destroy her family and divide it than stay and fight for them. In my opinion, that's a horrible thing to say. Todd, so far, has been fighting for his children. The only thing he wants is to get away from Sarah, someone who, as anyone can see, is manipulative, deceitful, and unfaithful. I don't understand how the person who caused all this pain and created this drama can now paint herself as the victim and continue ruining everyone else's life. But I guess it's in her nature. She did what she did because she's despicable, and she'll keep acting this way to the bitter end, trying to get something out of all this to feel better about herself. This is another reason why James and I believe that a child shouldn't grow up near a parent who's been unfaithful. It's the worst example and the worst influence for receiving a proper education. We hope Todd can get full custody because if Tommy continues to be influenced by his mother, things won't end well for him. For his younger sister, it'll be even worse because she's still little and doesn't fully understand what's happening. Over the years, it's likely that Sarah will manipulate her and turn her against Todd. There's also the possibility that she'll end up behaving like Sarah, believing that what Sarah did wasn't so bad, and blaming others. Right now, both James and I are completely on Todd's side and the kids' side, first because Todd really wants to be a good father to them, but also because we believe that neither Sarah nor the biological father are what the kids deserve. Their best chance at a better future is with Todd, and we're going to help them in any way we can. Even the rest of James's family, like my in-laws, are on Todd's side. Not even Sarah's parents are happy with what she's done. For example, the other day, we decided not to attend a family event. On one hand, we had another commitment, but also because we wanted to avoid some of the drama from Sarah, and because it was painful to see Nathan suffer because of everything Tommy is going through. During the event, Sarah started with her typical monologue, trying to paint Todd as the villain of the story. But my father-in-law interrupted her and told her to shut up, because all she was doing was causing more harm and pain to everyone. He pointed to Tommy, who was sitting across the room, and said, "Don't you see what your mistakes have caused? Don't you see that you keep hurting all your children? They don't deserve this, and neither do we. You should accept your mistakes and act like a mature person." Then my mother-in-law added that she didn't raise her like this and hoped that her granddaughter wouldn't have this kind of example to follow. Sarah threatened to leave with the kids, but no one in the family was on her side. My father-in-law told her she could leave if she wanted, but her grandchildren were staying. He said they needed to get away from the drama she'd caused and kept causing, and that he'd pick them up later. So Sarah left, and the kids stayed to play. Later, she called Todd to come spend the day with them, and he didn't hesitate for a second. My father-in-law said the kids looked much better, though it wasn't a miracle cure. But being away from their mother right now is the best thing that could happen to them, because her poison is transforming them, and no one in the family wants that. Except, it seems, Sarah. Deep down, it seems Sarah doesn't care about her children, only how she's seen and not losing to Todd. A real mother wouldn't hurt her children with these games. She'd try to protect them from everything. But at the same time, a mother wouldn't have been unfaithful to her husband. But here we are. Update 4. Better times are coming for this family with the latest news about my sister-in-law and her children. To start, my sister-in-law discovered that everything had been invited to my in-laws' house after she left, and she didn't like it. Not one bit. She went to my in-laws' house and confronted them because, according to her, they should be on her side, not Todd's. My in-laws responded by saying that they would always stand by the children in this, and that if Todd was doing well for them, then they'd be on his side. In a way, this triggered her anger, and after arguing, she grabbed a garden ornament from the front yard and threw it against her parents' car window. To avoid going too deep into this side of the story, which is another issue entirely, let me tell you that my father-in-law sued her, and she had to pay for the window. I mention this because it's important for the custody battle later on. As for the divorce, things went pretty well for Todd. There was more than enough evidence that Sarah had been unfaithful, so we can say that Todd won the divorce. Although, of course, no one truly wins in a divorce, especially one involving infidelity. But at least Sarah couldn't take away more from Todd than she already had. Now, the case for full custody of the children wasn't as simple. It was the complete opposite. But if you want to know the outcome, I'll tell you. Todd won. It wasn't easy because technically Todd wasn't the biological father of the children, but after months in court, he got it. Some family members like James and my in-laws testified about Sarah's character. The incident with the car window didn't help her either. What really worked in Todd's favor was the judge's willingness to consider granting full custody to the father instead of the mother, which is quite unusual. But the final nail in the coffin was the biological father's behavior. This man only showed up for his own selfish reasons. He didn't want to pay child support to Sarah if she had custody of the kids. Now that Sarah doesn't have custody, she has no grounds to demand it from him since there are no expenses to support the children. I'm not sure if Todd could demand anything from the biological father, but at least he hasn't said that he plans to do so. From what I understand, the biological father formally renounced his parental rights, as if it were an adoption. I want to clarify that I haven't followed every detail of the case, so this is the general idea. What's important here is that Todd has custody of both children. This has already begun to bear fruit, especially for Tommy and his sister who have started therapy. Sarah can see her children, but only under supervision. On the other hand, my in-laws can see them whenever they want, according to what Todd has decided, and so can we. This has also been positive for Nathan, who is getting back to playing with Tommy like before. There's still a lot to be done, but little by little, things are starting to normalize, and that's all that matters. As for Sarah, I don't know what to say. I haven't had much contact with her for a while. I blocked her, and I haven't heard much from her since. She sent a few messages to her parents or to James, but things are very cold between them now, and I don't know if they'll change at some point, to be honest.